All right, here we are. So today's topic is indeed the Netherlands, our country case study today as we start Europe. So did you write down midget golf? Well, I think probably not. And I put this in here as it's a little odd. Took this picture in Rotterdam in the Netherlands, and it reminded me that sometimes when we go from one language to another, things just don't quite match up right. Of course, this is miniature golf. I don't think we would have a sign in America saying midget golf. Did you write down wooden shoes? Well, that would have been a reasonable answer because this is something, yeah, it's very traditional for the Netherlands. Now, no one's wearing that kind of shoe to work. No one's going to the office with that kind of shoe on. This rack of shoes, it's definitely for tourists to buy, for tourists to take home with them, something that is traditionally from the Netherlands. Maybe a simple unadorned shoe to work in the muddy garden. Okay, maybe then a wooden shoe, but this is more just a traditional sort of thing. Did you put down flowers or tulips in particular? Yes, the Netherlands is famous for flowers. This is a good answer. Even going back to an interesting stock market sort of crash many, many years ago, having to do with tulip bulbs. Tulip bulbs somehow became extraordinarily valuable in a very odd thing and then crashed and lost a lot of money for people way back when. Well, this still, though, is a good answer because the Netherlands is huge in cut flowers, selling cut flowers. Okay, number one in the world. And I think this has something to do with geography. So we see there the Netherlands location highlighted in orange on this map, and they are near lots of people. The Netherlands is a crowded country itself, but it is also near many other European cities. So think about this historically. Historically, if you want to sell cut flowers, if you want to sell flowers, you need to get it to the buyer relatively quickly. No one wants to buy wilted flowers. Okay, if it takes too long, then it's worthless. So, well, they're in a pretty good location, a crowded, highly urban, highly populated portion of Europe. So they probably could get flowers to potential clients, lots of potential buyers nearby. Now, that's changed in the modern day because we have vastly better transportation, faster transportation. We can refrigerate transportation. And so the Netherlands does keep their existing flows going, keep the same networks going in some cases, but expanding. And for instance, the Netherlands imports flowers from Tanzania, Africa, on refrigerated airplanes, and then puts those flowers into their trading network. Did you put down cows? Turns out this would be a fairly good answer, but a little bit of a surprising answer, I think. The first time that I went to the Netherlands, I did not expect to see a lot of farmland. I knew that the Netherlands was quite a high population density country, but then I saw a lot of farmland. This does mean that the cities are particularly crowded because, of course, farmland is not crowded with people. But this too then makes some sense when we learn that the Netherlands is number one in dairy products exporting. And I think this matches with the flour example because some dairy products are going to spoil and you need to get them to the marketplace, to the buyer quickly. So it's helpful again if there's lots of people nearby. And now, of course, refrigerated transportation helps us here too. Milk might spoil in the olden days, but now we keep it refrigerated and lasts much longer. Maybe you like cheese. Netherlands is famous for cheese as part of this dairy products marketplace. Edam and Gouda are two popular cheeses from the Netherlands. Even so, water shows up. And this is a kind of foreshadowing of what's to come in this conversation today. Water, lots and lots of places. To get to the farmhouse, which is behind the trees on the right, you have to cross a little bridge. Bridges over water, very common in the Netherlands. Speaking of bridges over, well, I'd be surprised if any of you put this down, the ecoduct. I've never seen one in the United States, but I saw several in the Netherlands. Probably you can figure out what it's for, or maybe because it is for animals to cross the road. Okay, for animals to safely cross the road. It's presumed that the animals see the green and the natural environment there, and so just intuitively use the path over the road. Maybe the noise of cars on the road also keeps them away from the road. But okay, I can see the logic in it. I did try to find any record of ecoducts in North America. I did come up with this one in Alberta, Canada, but no, it's not a common thing in the United States or Canada. On the one hand, it does seem to work. There is evidence that the animals do in fact cross the road in these sorts of spots. Okay. On the other hand, obviously it costs money to build these things. And so there has to be a cost benefit analysis here to decide whether it is worth it or not. Some many years ago, boy, it's been over 25 years now, I was driving on the interstate highway in South Dakota, and it was dusk, and a deer just popped right out, and my car and the deer smacked together. Now, my car at the time was a Saab, built in Sweden and designed there to be able to withstand hitting a moose. A moose is even bigger than a deer. So my car was damaged, but did keep going. Can't say that for the deer. The deer died. So yeah, that was a sad moment for the deer and for my car. Okay. Yes, we hit deer in the United States. So is this a good value? Well, I don't know. We'd have to do some lots of numbers and dollar signs to figure out. But in the Netherlands, yeah, they do have these every now and then. Did you write down graffiti? That's sort of an odd one too. Well, several years back, I got to participate in a faculty exchange program to go to the Netherlands. College of DuPage and several other community colleges in Illinois participate in an exchange program, and usually there's 3 countries that are also participating, and almost always the Netherlands is one of those countries. So I was chosen to be a part of that exchange program. And how it worked is that in the fall of that year, a Dutch professor came here for 2 weeks, and he stayed at my house, and I showed him around, and I got him to go into the city, and we even got him to go to Wisconsin, look around. I introduced him to COD faculty who teach English as a second language. He taught Dutch as a second language. So for people migrating to the Netherlands, he taught them the national language, Dutch. All right. And then in the spring of that year, I went to the Netherlands for 2 weeks. I stayed at his house. He showed me around, similarly. Okay, well, that fall when I picked him up at the airport and drove him to my house, we're just driving along and he's very curious, very interested in seeing the differences between his homeland and here. And after a while, he said to me, "Where's the graffiti?" I thought that's a kind of curious question. And, I started looking around also. I couldn't really see anything. I said to him, well, if we could find a train, we'd find graffiti because lots of railroad cars have graffiti on them. But I'm not sure where else we would look. He said, oh, well, wait, when you come to the Netherlands, you'll see graffiti. And yes, that was true. Lots and lots of walls in the Netherlands have graffiti on them. So it's somehow different cultural thing and not as contested, I guess. So sometimes they're quite interesting. I call these bubble letters. But all right, one more difference there. All right, well, before we get to my three big things about the Netherlands, just a little bit of background here. So here we have the location of the Netherlands and several of its bigger cities. Amsterdam, of course, is the big city. If you put down Amsterdam in the chat, yep, that would be a good answer. Rotterdam is also a very prominent city. And then next to Rotterdam is Den Haag. Often in English, we say The Hague. And that is where the International Court, the World Court, is located. You see just south of the Netherlands, we have Belgium, and then on the east side, we have Germany. My host, his city was east of Amsterdam and past that island you see right in the middle, just east of the island there. The Netherlands is part of the European Union. In fact, the Netherlands was one of the original founders of what eventually became the European Union. After World War II, there was quite a great demand for rebuilding. Of course, yes, lots of destruction. So to rebuild Europe, you needed iron and steel. To do that, you needed iron ore. And to make steel, you also need coal. So it turns out if you look around Europe for these resources, iron ore and coal, there's no one country that has lots of both. There's some countries that have lots of one of those things. Well, 6 countries decided to get together and eliminate barriers to trading iron and coal and steel, to try to jumpstart, to try to facilitate the production of iron and steel in the post-war. And the Netherlands was one of those 6 countries. They called the group the European Coal and Steel Community. All right, well, it turns out that worked pretty well. And so they decided to expand in terms of the number of products that they would cover in this kind of open trading system. And other countries learned about this and decided it was a good idea and tried to join. And yes, other countries joined. It kept expanding in this ways, in numbers of countries and in different things, and then eventually went beyond just economic things to a variety of things: foreign policy, international crime, different things that they felt they could work together on. And eventually then they changed the name to the European Union. And there were 15 countries at the time, and thus there are 15 stars on the European Union flag. We've added more countries since then, especially post-Soviet countries joining the European Union. The Netherlands also uses the euro as money, the coins and the bills. And I found that very helpful as a tourist. Flew into Amsterdam and traded my dollars in for euros. But one day we went to Belgium. I didn't have to get new money in Belgium because they were using the euro also. One day we went into Germany. Same thing. I didn't have to trade money there. It was still the euro. So that's a very handy thing for traveling within the European Union. Okay, and it's a medium-sized country, I guess certainly not huge in population and definitely small in area. But you take that kind of medium number and you place it in a small place and you get very crowded. So there's over 1,000 people per square mile for the whole country, averaging for the whole country. And that makes it the most crowded country in Europe. It has the highest population density in Europe if you don't count microstates or city-states. So for instance, Monaco is a city-state, a city and a country at the same time. Well, obviously cities are crowded. And if you are only a city, then yeah, certainly you'll have a high population density. So because that's an oddity, right? A city that's a country at the same time. All right, we make a special note of that. So not counting microstates or city-states, Netherlands is the most crowded country in Europe. And I would compare it to New Jersey in that way. New Jersey is our most crowded state, also a fairly small area state. And a bonus comparison is that New Jersey is known as the Garden State. And it got that nickname by providing agricultural products to New York City and to Philadelphia, two big cities on its borders. So like the Netherlands, yes, there is some agricultural distinctiveness there. All right, so my three key things today about the Netherlands. Three things everybody should know about the Netherlands. Number one, water and wind. Water and wind, it seems like everywhere all the time. Number two, I'm going to give you two words from the Dutch language that I think help you understand the Dutch culture very well. Know the two words, you understand a lot about how they think. And number three, bicycles. Bicycles. Seems like there's bicycles everywhere. All right, and let me just put in here Dutch, Netherlands. Those two words don't sound at all alike, and so sometimes people get confused. Who is it that speak Dutch? Yeah, it's the people in the Netherlands. Sometimes people get it confused with Denmark and the Danish people. In Denmark, they are Danish. In the Netherlands, they are Dutch. Okay. All right, thing number one then. Water and wind not only are elements of daily life, but are tied to the country's past. All right, so very big deal here, water and wind. Well, we did see a map, and the map did show us that it borders the North Sea. Okay, it borders the North Sea, and the North Sea is a blustery area. Yes, lots of windy days on the North Sea. All right, so it's easy for breeze winds coming off the North Sea to come on the coast of Netherlands, and then, well, there's not really anything there to stop it. The Netherlands is famous for being flat, very flat. So there's no mountains in the way to push against the wind. There's no huge hills in the way even to block the flow of the wind. There's basically nothing to block the flow of the wind. So the Netherlands for years has made good use of this with windmills. So if you put in the chat windmills, that would be a great answer. Here's a picture of one of the old style of windmills. Not many of these are working anymore, but there are quite a few still on the landscape. Some of them have been turned into museums. Many of them are simply there kind of as cultural reminders, historical reminders. But they have many, many, many of these old style windmills. This one happens to be the world's tallest. But now, of course, they have the modern windmills, some of these 3-blade or some of these 2-blade windmills. And of course, the idea now is generating electricity. Back in the day, some of the old ones would have different means. They'd create some power, yes, but they'd also grind grain and things like that. All right, but now it's purely to produce electricity. And it seems to me it's quite an efficient way to do this because the wind is coming. Pretty much every day, the wind is coming off the coast. There's nothing to stop it, so put up a windmill. All right, well, sure, you have to pay for it. It is an expensive piece of infrastructure, and you're going to have to do some maintenance on it. But otherwise, yeah, the wind blows, the turbines move, and electricity is generated. So, yeah, the Dutch really go with this. Water, though, everywhere as well. And water is very prominent, and the Dutch have done amazing jobs of engineering to create dams and dikes to control where water is. So you can see from the lines and the froth there on one side, you can regulate how much water comes through the dams or dikes. You can also pump water back to the other side. Okay. And well, they've done huge engineering projects shown on this map. So the bright red here, those are areas that are below sea level. Those are areas that should be underwater. But through huge engineering processes, the Dutch have reclaimed those lands. That is now land and not water. So they've put up dikes, they've pumped water out, and they maintain these regions so that, yeah, there's towns and cities there. It's regular land, but it's technically below sea level. The little bits of orange there, it says 0 to 1 meter above sea level. So just barely above sea level. And then the tan is 1 meter or higher, but it's still quite flat. All right, so the Dutch have done this amazing job of reclaiming lands. And in some cases, that just means putting the water into canals. So these are called polders or polder lands. And this is farmland, so that you can see there's land there to be farmed, but there's lots of water. Well, put the water in canals, pump it out of the farmlands into the canals. So that, in fact, the country has canals, it seems, everywhere. And some of the cities are famous for their canals. Amsterdam certainly is famous for its canals. So there are canals cutting through all of Amsterdam. Of course, there are roads as well. You see a number of vehicles parked here, sure, but there are boats that go on these canals as well, small boats. And so there's canals just everywhere. Here's a canal boat that's a tourist boat. You can get a guided tour of Amsterdam through the canals on a boat like this. Next to the canals, of course, are canal houses. And this is just extremely typical. These buildings, 3, 4, sometimes 5 stories high. Sometimes at the bottom, there's a store and a warehouse above it, or a store and apartments above it, or sometimes it's just all housing. But yes, this is such a common view and such a compact, tightly packed urban setting. Well, one day my host got me on the train and sent me to Amsterdam on the train, where I met then one of his friends in Amsterdam. And this guy gave me the bicycling tour of Amsterdam. So we looked at a variety of places. And once we stopped right here and I took this photo, and he was very interested in architecture. I feel like the Dutch are quite interested in architecture, design, engineering, that sort of thing. And maybe that does stem from this huge engineering project to keep the water out. Well, he explained that the idea here was that there's a concrete pier, so this slab of concrete, and then people could buy slots, essentially, a certain number of feet of that concrete pier. And then you'd get your own designer, your own architect, your own builder, and build what you want there. And that's why each of those is different. Each of those has a different designer and probably a different builder. He thought that was very interesting, and I do too, that, yeah, that the design is different there. Another aspect of water, though, is Rotterdam, the port of Rotterdam. Rotterdam, because of two aspects of water, is the world's busiest port. In terms of tons of material going through, Rotterdam is the world's busiest port. So here you see part of the Rhine River in Rotterdam, and it just seems to go on and on. There's lots of activity along the water here, lots of economic activity. So you bring your product on a boat. You bring it international shipping, you bring it to Rotterdam. So Rotterdam is going to be right about here. If you go from the southeast corner of England and right across, that's right there. That's where Rotterdam is. And you'll see that from Rotterdam, there is a river, the Rhine, that goes southeastward. And you'll see that it almost crosses another river, another very long river that goes to the east from there. That other river is the Danube. Very important river in Europe. So let's say that you're a manufacturer somewhere out there in the world and you want to sell your product in Europe. The common way to get it to Europe is on a ship, on an ocean-going vessel. So you sail that across and you dock at Rotterdam. Well, you could offload right there onto trucks, and those trucks could drive to a number of nearby cities and sell your product. But you also might offload yours onto a smaller boat and send that boat down the Rhine River to a number of cities there, especially in Germany, on the Rhine River. That would be great to hit your marketplace, to hit potential buyers. But also the Danube is right there. Oh, but they don't quite connect, do they? Oh, but they do, because they built a canal to do specifically that. So there is a canal now that connects the Rhine to the Danube. So you can put your product in Rotterdam, put it on a smaller boat, send it down the Rhine, and then connect to the Danube. And the Danube goes all the way to the Black Sea. And the Danube is the best in the world for international borders. That is, the Danube is either the border or crosses the border of more countries than any other river does in the world. Think about that for trade. Think about maximizing the number of countries you can hit. Well, put your product on a ship, sail it to Rotterdam, put it on a smaller boat, sail down the Rhine, connect to the Danube, and go all the way to the Black Sea. And you've hit so many different marketplaces. Well, this helps explain why Rotterdam is the world's busiest port. Now, of course, you could reverse the process too. You could be somewhere on the Danube River and you have a factory there and you build something and you sail it on the rivers all the way to Rotterdam, where then it gets put on an ocean-going vessel and out to the world. So you could send your product to the rest of the world by reversing that pattern. Here's just a little bonus fact. While I was there in Rotterdam, I just happened to look, and there was a boat sailing by named the Abel Tasman. I thought, oh, yeah, that makes sense, because we remember Abel Tasman as the guy who sailed for the Netherlands, trying to find Australia and landing on Australia's island, which is now known as Tasmania, going on to New Zealand, naming that for a portion of the Netherlands, the Zeeland province. So yeah, appropriate that the boat is named Abel Tasman. In Rotterdam, we went up the Euromast. Now there's a number of cities, big cities across the world that have these sorts of towers. Seattle, Washington has the Space Needle, for instance. Toronto in Canada has the CN Tower. So yes, in Rotterdam, they have the Euromast. So my host took me up the Euromast here, and you see the big disc there. That's a restaurant. It's a revolving restaurant. We stopped for a little snack there. And then on the white pole at the top, you can see there's sort of a disc there. That disc goes up and down the pole. So you can get a ride on that to go up even higher then. Well, this picture I took from the Euromast. All right. Well, from there, we went on towards Belgium. Belgium, just around the corner from Rotterdam. Okay, and I told my host that part of being in Europe was the opportunity to check off some boxes on my bucket list. And one of the big categories is trying to be in every country in Europe, trying to visit every country in Europe. So I wanted to visit Belgium and check it off my list. So since we were nearby, we, decided to go on towards Belgium. And just before the border, there was a really interesting town called Viria with water, of course, but big old city walls, cannons, huge cathedral. It's quite interesting. Okay. But then we got to Belgium. And we'd driven in about a mile into Belgium. And this was our big Saturday excursion, going from his home to Rotterdam and on. And now we're in Belgium. And I said to him, hey, this is great. We've had a busy day, but now we're in Belgium. I can check it off my list. It's okay if we go home now. And he said, no, I need to show you Belgium. Well, that's explained by going on to number 2 here, because that's explained by one of these keywords about the Netherlands. So these are, I think, funny looking words. They can be funny sounding words. The Dutch have a bit of a harsh sounding language, I think. So Hergen and Hazalak are these words here. Yes, Dutch language is related to German. It's related to English. It's in the Indo-European family, but a bit harsher sounding. So thing number 2, while Hergen and Hazalak may be strange looking words, they refer to key features of Dutch life. So this first one, Hergen. So Hergen, I think, is tolerance. I think of it as tolerance. And I believe that it goes back to the Dutch pattern of international trade. The Netherlands is a small country. Small country. You know, I compared it to New Jersey. It's a small country. They cannot possibly have every natural resource that they might want to use. Okay? No, it's just a small place. To prosper, they need to trade. They need to trade with other places. So historically, they were explorers and worldwide traders. Again, we can go back to Abel Tasman. Yes, and they developed over many years a vast international trading network. They're very, very good at it. And yes, this helps them be a prosperous country and have access to things that they wouldn't just have if they were just this little country. All right, but how do you do that well? Well, I'm sure it can be quite complicated at times, but it seems to me that one element of it is tolerance. So what if you and I hate each other? What if we hate each other? Are we going to do business together? Well, we could, I suppose, but it seems to me it's less likely. Okay, less likely if we hate each other. What if we're great pals? Are we going to do business together? Well, sure, that seems natural. All right, fine. What if we're somewhere in the middle? What if we're somewhere in the middle where, I think you are a little bit odd. You do some things that I'm not sure if I would want to do. Should we do some trade? Well, I'd like to do some trade. So maybe I'll just be tolerant. Maybe I'll just say, oh, you do that? Well, that's your business. Let's do some trade. Let's make some money. This is how I think the Dutch have aided themselves in doing a lot of international trade, is getting along, of being tolerant of some things that maybe I wouldn't do, but maybe you would. Okay. So for instance, when you put something in the chat, did you put down this? The coffee shop. Because in the Netherlands, they don't really sell coffee at the coffee shops. They mostly sell marijuana. And in the coffee shops, that is just fine. That is legal. Yes. Well, of course, in the United States now, we have some places where this is legal as well. But for many years, the Dutch have thought about this in this sort of tolerant way. The Dutch asked, well, if marijuana is illegal, will some people use it anyway? Obviously, the answer is yes. If marijuana is legal, will some people use it? Well, again, obviously, yes. So the Dutch say, well, okay, if it's going to happen no matter what we choose for legality, why don't we just make it legal, but let's regulate it. So coffee shops apply for approval to sell marijuana. And then in the coffee shop, if you're an adult, you can buy it and it's fine. However, if you were to go 6 streets away, go down a dark back alley and find a guy with his trunk open and he's selling weed out of his trunk, no, that's not okay. That's a crime. In the sanctioned coffee shop, okay. Well, yeah. So the Dutch attitude is, all right, if it's going to happen anyway, let's just regulate it. And all right, we'll be tolerant. Maybe I'm not interested. Maybe you are. We can get along, can't we? And do some business. Additionally, the Dutch think that this reduces violent crime. And that makes sense also. If you think of the drug trade in the United States, you know that there is violent crime that also happens with that. If you think about drug cartels in the world, of course, yes, you hear about violent crimes and murders associated with the drug trade. But if marijuana is legal but regulated, well, often there's no need for violence within that trade. And you can tax it too. Or maybe you wrote down this in the chat about the Netherlands. And I put this in this category too, because it's the same sort of thing. The Dutch ask, well, if prostitution is illegal, is it going to happen anyway? Well, yes. If you look at the history of the world, yes. If prostitution is legal, will it happen anyway? Well, obviously, again, yes. So once more, the Dutch say, well, if it's going to happen either way anyway, why not make it legal, but restricted? So yes, prostitution is legal in the red light district, but not just anywhere. So it's regulated. And the women are regularly tested for sexually transmitted diseases, which is good. And in fact, the Netherlands has quite a low rate of sexually transmitted diseases. It is shocking. It is weird. It is mind-blowing to be in Amsterdam and see the red light district, because it looks basically like this picture where the women are behind glass doors. And yeah, in this picture, you see a man apparently negotiating. Okay, yeah, so it's quite a bit different, but it's this Dutch idea. Yeah, we can get along, even if we don't agree on whether something's good or not. We can get along and do business. All right, so that first word, largely meaning tolerance. The second word here, gezellig. People generally say, the Dutch say it doesn't quite match up with anything in English, but cozy is the word that is usually tried to explain this. All right, the sound should be coming through in a minute here on this video clip. We've got the Dutch ambassador to Canada here to tell us about this word.
Ambassador Geert, can you tell us a little bit about the word gezellig and the proper way for Canadians to pronounce it?
With pleasure. Gezellig, that's how we pronounce it, means something like cozy. It's a very Dutch word, hard to translate, and it says a lot about, I think, what the Dutch stand for. So it's a combination of, having fun, socializing with others, and having a good time. And cozy is probably the English word that comes closest, but it doesn't really capture it for 100%, because gezellig is even more than that, goes beyond cozy. So again, you have to practice. For Canadians, we say it is very gezellig.
Excellent. Can you say it nice and slowly with an emphasis on how to say the ge sound? Because I don't do it justice.
It's tough. So we'll try it once more.
Yeah.
It's called gezellig.
Excellent. Great. And you've heard that there's a restaurant opening in Ottawa that's going to go by that name. How do you feel about that?
I think it's a great name, and I think Canadians will take a little time to pronounce it just properly.
Right.
But we're patient, but I'm sure that sooner rather than later, a lot of people in Ottawa will be saying, wow, that restaurant was really gezellig.
Awesome. And they may actually get to pronounce your name a little bit better as a result as well, right?
Well, that's my secret agenda.
Thank you very much.
You're most welcome.
Okay, so the idea here is that this hard to pronounce word, gezellig, kind of like cozy. So for instance, in the United States, we have fast food restaurants, lots of them, right? And surely all of us have driven up to the drive-up window and made our order and got the food coming right out the window, and we drive off. And sometimes we even eat the food in the car as we're driving to some other place. That's quite American. That is not Dutch. No, that is not gezellig. The 2-hour lunch at a cafe with your friends, yeah, that would be cozy. That would be gezellig. That would be Dutch. So here's my host family in the Netherlands, good people. And one day he sent me off with a geography class, a high school geography class, field trip. Okay, field trip. And we got along there and we went to a small town. The bus was about an hour drive. Stopped at a town and pulled right up to a bicycle rental shop. Bicycle rental shop. Everybody got out. All the students got a bicycle and a map, and they set out on this field trip. The field trip had a few stops, but in total was about 15 miles on the bicycles. Got to thinking, all my kids went to Glenbard East for high school. Could Glenbard East have had a 15-mile bicycle field trip? I'm doubtful. First of all, I'm not sure all the students could do a 15-mile bike ride. And secondly, there'd certainly be questions of liability. What if a student fell off a bike, broke the arm? Okay, then what? So that would be quite surprising, I think. But these students, oh, no problem. Nobody even said anything. Nobody complained about it. No, it was just normal. Just normal. More on that shortly with bicycles. Lauren here says that there are tall people in the Netherlands. Lauren herself is 5'10" and she likes a tall man, and she found many of them in the Netherlands. Who is Lauren? Well, I don't know. You can find anything on the internet, but I put it in here because it's true. The Netherlands are apparently the tallest people in the world. Here are averages compared to Americans. So the average 19-year-old man in the Netherlands is 6 feet tall, and compared to men here, 5'9.5". So 2.5 inches taller. The women, 5'5¾" compared to American women, 5'3¾", 2 inches taller. Okay, so not just but yeah, 2 whole inches at least taller on average. I noticed that in my travel in the Netherlands. I had kind of had to change the angle at which I would look at people, even just walking around. You can't tell, I'm 6'3", so I am tall, and yes, so my angle is usually downward to see people, but I had to kind of tip that upwards when I was there. And orange. Orange is the national color of the Netherlands. If you ever see some international sporting event and they show you the crowd and there's this huge section of orange in the crowd, this is it. This will be the Netherlands. So a World Cup soccer match, for instance, yeah, when the Netherlands is playing, there'll be lots of orange clad people in the stands. The second word then, gezellig, talks about culture and the way of life. A slower pace of life than Americans have, and a cozier way of life. There was one day when I went with several other people on a tour, a driving tour of some of the newly reclaimed lands in the Netherlands. Of course, all these lands that should be underwater, they were not just bam, magically all changed in an instant. No, it's been progressively developed more and more. So this was to look at some of the newer reclaimed lands. Okay, and so we went around for a while, and then we stopped at a cafe and had lunch for about 2 hours. Was this cozy sort of lunch? And then we spent more of the afternoon on this tour, driving around, stopping and looking at things. And then we headed back. And so we were heading back, and it was about 6 p.m. And we were probably about 10 miles from where we started out. So my host would pick me up, and we'd go back to his place, and we could relax. And so we were pretty close, and it was about 6 p.m. And in my head, I was thinking, okay, it's been an interesting day, but I'm kind of tired now, and it'll be good just to kick back at my host's home. And then we stopped for the 2-hour supper. And I had to adjust my thinking. And I said to myself, okay, gezellig. This is the way the Dutch do things. Now we're going to have the cozy 2-hour supper. Just adjust. And so that's what I did. And we got home quite a bit later. All right, thing number 3, bicycles. Yeah, like on this student field trip. Well, I think it is actually the perfect country for bicycles because it's incredibly flat and it's a relatively small country. So you can go almost anywhere on a bicycle. And indeed, small vehicles are quite common too. Well, again, it's super flat. So this map kind of shows you some of that. And again, it's quite crowded. This is my host city, Harderwijk, and even the mid-sized cities are very compact. You see one building after another, no yard in between, no front yard there, just the cobblestone street. My host lived in this townhouse compactly next to other buildings. So compact that, yes, some people live on the canals, actually. You can see the houseboats here. Most of those houseboats actually never move. They don't sail up and down the canals. They're just permanently moored there. A little extra housing space in a crowded location. So some of the vehicles are small. You've seen these in America, but they're much more common there. These little vehicles, great for parking. They're so small. Bonus fact here, bonus fact. One of the times that I was in the Netherlands, I saw one of these vehicles. This is the Trabant, and it is somewhat infamous. This is the car that was made in communist East Germany. Back when there were 2 Germanys, West Germany and East Germany, communist side was East Germany, and they produced this car, the Trabant. No, you could not buy a BMW when you were living in East Germany. Maybe you couldn't afford it, but no, you couldn't be allowed to buy it anyway. Communism was going to show that they were better than the rest of the world. They were not going to let you buy something that might give you the idea that, oh, that Western car is great. No. So instead, East Germans could buy the Trabant, but not right away. They didn't produce that many of them, so you had to get on a waiting list. to get the Trabant, and you might wait a couple years before it was your turn to pay your money and purchase your Trabant and take your Trabant home. Curiously, though, if you ever find a list of the 10 worst automobiles of all time, this car will be on the list. These were horrible cars, just very poor quality, subject to breakdowns. Yes, but you had to wait. You had to be on a waiting list to get this in East Germany. Well, this isn't a car, but it's not exactly a bicycle either, but it is pedal powered. Yes, it's like a sidecar to a motorcycle, but he's on a bike path pedaling away there. And for efficiency of transportation, the trains are great in the Netherlands, as they are in most of Europe there. And I got around quite a bit on trains. But it is the bicycle. Everybody has a bicycle. Okay. Again, I got the bicycling tour of Amsterdam with the friend of my host. So we rode around on bicycles. We stopped and looked at things. He showed me different highlights of Amsterdam. And then eventually we went back to his place and got some food. Okay. Yes, especially after riding the bicycle for a while. And then we went down to the garage area, and he showed me that he owns 9 bicycles. He had a bicycle for every different purpose. If he was going to do cross country, he had one kind of bicycle. If he was going to do a race, he had a different kind of bicycle. If he was just going to go 4 blocks away to the grocery store, he had an old banged up bicycle. He had a recumbent bicycle where you kind of sit in a chair kind of and your legs are out front. He had, and more. Yeah. Not everybody has 9 bicycles, but everybody has a bicycle. I talked to one woman and she explained that her mother had finally stopped riding a bicycle. Why had she finally stopped? She turned 80. At 79, she had still been out riding a bicycle. Everybody has a bicycle. This is not for cars. This is a bicycle parking ramp. Everybody has a bicycle. Every road has a bike lane or bike path along with it. One day we were out in the countryside and we were driving on a dirt road. And I looked over and yes, there was a dirt bike path going right with us. Everywhere there's bicycles. And drivers of cars must be very aware of this, because by law, if there is a car and bicycle accident, it is always 100% the car's fault. By law, whatever happens, it's 100% the car's fault. Well, that's probably good because the bicycle, of course, is at much greater risk. The cyclist maybe dies if there's a car bicycle accident, right? There's basically no risk for the driver of the car. Everybody has a bicycle. I saw men and women going to work every day in their business clothes, going to work on bicycles. That's just normal. I saw a woman, I thought she was about 20 years old. She was wearing a party dress and she was riding her bicycle. Okay, I've never seen that in the United States. Everybody has a bicycle because it's the perfect setting for that. Okay, well, one day we went to Belgium. One day we went to Belgium, and here's what happened when we got to the border. Nothing. Nothing happened. We just kept driving, and there was a sign there that said Belgium. That was it. It was just like driving to Wisconsin in that way. No, nothing happens when you reach the Wisconsin border. There's just a sign that says welcome to Wisconsin. So I told my host we could check my box and we could go home, but he said, no, I need to show you Belgium. And that's part of the word gezellig again. Cozy. That's the Dutch way of life. As my host, he couldn't let me just go 1 mile into Belgium. He needed to show me something about Belgium. So we went on to this city, Bruges. Beautiful city. It also has canals. And we stopped and we parked and we got out of the car, and he said to me, now I'm going to show you people who really know how to live. I thought, what? Belgians? Yes. So we got a very fine meal in Bruges here and paid for it with euros. A different day, we went in the other direction, well, to the east, and we went to Germany. And this town, Emmerich, is just across the border from the Netherlands. So there's this huge church there, and we stopped and got pastries at a bakery there and paid in euros, and they were really good. And it was nice, convenient to be paid in euros. When we got to Germany, nothing happened, just drove right in. Just before we got to Germany, though, still in the Netherlands, we stopped here at the Berg Castle. Very handsome building there, handsome moat. It was quite interesting. And it's Berg with an H. Berg with an H. And that's a little bit unusual. A little bit unusual. B-E-R-G, quite a few places with that, or with that as the end of a word. B-U-R-G, yeah, a lot of those. Sometimes B-O-U-R-G. You can think of Luxembourg, for instance, with the H. Quite unusual. Well, it's curious then, because my mother's maiden name was Berg, B-E-R-G-H. I now claim that I own part of this castle because of the H. Don't you think? Although my ancestry is Norwegian. Maybe I own one of those bricks because of the H. All right, so those are my 3 things everybody should know about the Netherlands. Water and wind are there all the time, everywhere. Thus, the windmills. 2 words that help you understand the Dutch culture. Hedingen and gezellig. Basically, tolerance and cozy. And number 3, bicycles. Every